I love the vent controls. They're like something out of the Normandy. Just absolutely fabulous. And I would gladly cross the United States. I drive up to Alaska in a Citroën DS or ID. Sometimes I actually wonder how and why it is that I get paid to do what it is that I do. Well, I know why, because I love it and I'm good at it. But more than that, the gratitude that I feel when I get to do what it is that I'm doing right now, which is to drive cars that I love. And the car I'm driving today is one of those cars. This is a 1972 Citroën ID 20 brake. The Citroën DS and ID, I should say ID et DS, are two of the most revolutionary cars ever created. I've often spoken of cars as time machines, and they are very much to me, and I think to anybody who drives an old car. But I would love to have a literal time machine to go back to October 1955, the Paris Auto Show. And Citroën unveiled their new model, the DS. It must have been as if aliens had literally landed in Paris.
You know, I'm proud the Audrain Museum has chosen J&L's car care products as the official car care product of the Concours. You know, you're not supposed to use that in direct sunlight.
Yeah, but I'm working on my tan, Jay.
Okay, hard to get help.
Citroën was always known as being a company of advanced engineering. After all, they've been making the traction avant, their front-wheel drive car, quite successfully since the 1930s. And they made a front-wheel drive car that worked a lot better than almost anybody else's mass-produced front-wheel drive car did. And with France having gone through what it went through in World War II, it took a while for the French automobile industry to make a comeback, that part of it which still existed. But Citroën was ready 10 years after the end of World War II with a car that had been in development for at least 15, if not 20 years. And this is that car. The first car with fully hydropneumatic suspension, disc brakes. Of course, Citroën was owned by Michelin at the time, and so even the traction avant had been designed to maximize the use of the Michelin radial tires, as was this car, the new one, of course. And the natural propensity of French cars to have very supple suspensions to handle some of the rough roads in rural France was already quite well known and established. The hydropneumatic suspension just took that to a completely different level. You were literally riding on a cloud. And the car was not only revolutionary in its design. The Italian industrial designer Flaminio Bertoni designed the DS, and it literally looked like a spaceship. It was a car whose engineering was matched by its design. If Flaminio Bertoni's design had been used for a plainer, more ordinary car, it would have been a shame. This is definitely the car for which it was destined. Is the Citroën DS a perfect car? No, it's not. The main reason is the engine. Powered by a 2-liter 4-cylinder engine, which people have described charitably at best as agricultural. I mean, it gets the job done, but it's not up to the chassis and the design, certainly. And part of that is because of the situation in France with the government and taxes. France had basically eliminated their entire luxury car industry by putting a very, very steep tax on any cars over 2 liters. So everyone went with very small or smallish 2-liter max 4-cylinder engines. So before the war, there had been a 6-cylinder version of the Traction, and Citroën had actually planned a flat 6 for the DS, which never came to fruition. And there was also some idea at one point of perhaps a rotary engine version of this car, which would have been quite wonderful. But in any event, we had to deal with the engine that Citroën had. Now, that paucity of interesting engines actually had another great side benefit, which was Citroën's acquisition of Maserati to create the Citroën SM, their range-stopping, spectacular GT luxury car with this amazing hydraulic suspension and a Maserati-designed V6 engine. More on that another day. I love the SM, some of my favorite cars of all time. But back to this Citroën. When it was introduced, it was an immediate sensation. The first hour, they took hundreds of orders. By the end of the first day, they had taken 12,000 orders for the new car. And by the end of the 10 days of the show, they'd taken 80,000 orders. A record that apparently was not beaten until the Tesla Model 3. The fact that people accepted this so quickly, I think, spoke to two things. One, Citroën's well-deserved reputation, and the fact that people were ready for something truly new after waiting for so long for cars. It's a real shame that Citroën really didn't take off in the US the way it should have. They sold most Citroëns in the US in the mid-1960s. They introduced the DS to the US in 1956, and the last ones were sold in 1972. And these cars are just an absolute wonder. They're a marvel. People often talk about the electrification of classics, and I can't say I'm ambivalent about it. I have very strong opinions about it. For any car, in my opinion, in which the engine is the primary driver of its appeal, a sports car, a GT car, the idea of replacing the glorious XK engine in an E-Type with an electric power plant just makes no sense to me. Or even a Porsche 911 for that matter. But if you have a car like this, I think an electric conversion of a Citroën DS could be a wonderful thing, because you would simply float quietly through the landscape, and I think that it would frankly deliver a lot of what Citroën couldn't with this particular engine. Nonetheless, there's still a great deal to be admired and loved about this car just the way it is. And this example that I'm driving, a brake, the station wagon, is even better adapted for this wonderful suspension, because of course you have this wonderful floating suspension that also allows you to adjust the ride height depending on the load that you're carrying, which I also think is quite brilliant. And it gives you a level of ease that can scarcely be imagined in any other car. The wonderful other things that make this car wonderful are the single spoke wheel, a great safety innovation at a time when most steering wheels had big protuberances that would attack you in the case of an accident. Citroën thought about that. The wheel's a breakaway wheel as well for added comfort and safety. The controls are very, very simple, very graphic. I love the vent controls. They're like something out of the Normandy. Just absolutely fabulous. I know for my cross-country trip test, and I would gladly cross the United States. I drive up to Alaska in a Citroën DS or ID. Just wonderful, effortless, spectacular. And last but not least, just the names. DS is D and S, but it's also DS, goddess, in French, and ID is idée in French, idea. This is the beautifully executed idea of a goddess.